Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode on our opening repertoires. This time we want to look with the black pieces, and we're going to take a look what happens when our opponent is playing something dull, something boring, and that would be the four knights. So this is a very common opening that gets played a lot at the beginner level with the white pieces, and we're going to see how to punish our opponent for playing this dull opening or at the very least obtain a very comfortable position. So let's dive right into it. We're going to start off with pawn up to e4, pawn to e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, and since our opponent has played this move, they're offering to go into a four knights, and you'd think, why is this called four knights? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there you go. Okay, so very symmetrical position and very boring position, but it is solid, so I can't knock them on that. However, there are other plans. Check out my other videos on the Giocco piano and the fried liver. Those are the recommendations that I would have as white. Okay, but anyway, back to our video on the four knights. Here, a very common move that white would play is bishop up to c4, and this allows black to have a very shocking opportunity. If I give you a second to pause the video, what move could you come up with as black to play a very tricky move here? Okay, so if you had seen the video series on some of the most common mistakes that we make of gaining some squares and giving up other squares, then this position might look familiar to you. In this case, black can again try a center fork trick where we would play knight captures on e4, and if white is just capturing back, then we can give him the center fork trick. So we are getting the piece back, and white can't really do much else apart from bishop d3 and capture, recapture. Material is equal, but black is having a nice game here because white has had to move this bishop 1, 2, 3 times, and they're just exchanging some pieces here, and black will have a comfortable game. Perhaps after bishop to d6, and black is doing more than okay here. But there are a few tricky alternatives for white. Say, for example, the second most common move. We'll look into that one. We'll just rewind here. Instead of knight capturing on e4, white can see that black has this trick here. They're trying to do the center fork trick, so they can use a tactic called a desperado. A desperado would be a tactic that when we are seeing that we're going to lose a piece, we're just going to get anything that we can for him. So in this case, white would see, okay, if I just recapture, then one of my pieces will be going down here. So I'm going to take my bishop and use it as a desperado, and I'm going to capture on f7, give a check, just to throw my opponent off. Turns out that black is totally fine here. We just have to simply recapture. And just as a general rule, if your opponent is playing some sort of attack like this and they're sacrificing, if you don't see a particular way as to how you are losing by accepting the material, then definitely go ahead and always take the material. There are very few exceptions to this rule. Okay, back to this. Now and only now will white capture back the knight. So again, material is even, and it seems like white has tricked black because material is even, but black's king is not able to castle anymore. It looks unsafe. But if we are studying this video, then we'll find that those fears are unfounded. After black still plays d5, then we're only attacking the knight, but we aren't getting the fork. White can give some nasty looking checks, but now this king actually has a fairly safe residence on g8, and white doesn't have a light square bishop that could possibly attack this king, so this guy's still fairly safe. And then, for example, white continues to develop with d4. If I let you pause the video, what would you play as black? This is a defensive move, and we want to make sure that we're not just allowing our opponent's aggressively placed pieces to lie there. Okay, so if you came up with pawn to h6, then that would be a good move, because we don't want to allow our opponent to just keep some of these menacing looking pieces here. And it turns out that this knight actually doesn't have a very good place to go, since he can't obviously go to e4 because of our pawn, he can't travel to e6 because of our bishop, can't travel to f7 safely, can't travel to h7, and can't travel to f3 as well. So that just leaves knight over to h3, which is very sad. And then black has a couple of good alternatives here. Most commonly, you'll see bishop capturing on h3 being played because it's a capture, and when white captures back, then white is saddled with this weakness, that being the doubled and isolated pawns, and another isolated pawn on the f file. However, there's actually a much more powerful move here. Black can play their bishop to g4, and this will make a threat. If white then plays almost any move that doesn't answer this threat, say for example bishop to d2, then if I let you pause the video, what would you play with the black pieces? That's correct. If you said pawn to e4, because this will put more pressure on the pinned piece. And now white doesn't have any satisfactory response to save this knight, and they of course can't move it because then they would be dropping their queen. So white will need to play pawn captures pawn, and black will respond with knight captures pawn, still putting more pressure on this knight, and then white will have yet another problem on their hands. If white plays some move that doesn't answer the threat that black has, say for example bishop out to f4, then if I give you a moment, what would you play with the black pieces? Pause the video if you need to. Okay, so it turns out that there's a different type of tactic rather than a desperado, and that would be an overloaded piece. So which piece is doing too many jobs right now? Well, it's the pawn on g2. He's trying to guard the h3 knight, but he's also trying to guard the f3 knight. If black forces this pawn to do one job, capturing here, and pawn of course must capture because the queen can't put herself on f3 with the bishop's vision still there, then that leaves the knight now unguarded on h3, so black can just lop off this knight and black will be a piece up. So that would be very powerful for black. So that leaves white with basically one other reasonable option, and that would be knight back to g1, knight h to g1, which is very sad. If you'll note, this knight had started on the b1 square and made one, had made 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5 moves to wind up where the king's knight had started. So this would be a very good position for black, where black has much more development than white, and they still have this annoying pin to work with. So black would be in a much better position, and we can see that after white's attempt to play the 4 knights opening, black is doing more than okay. So the main takeaways from this video: we want to play this fork trick if given the chance on d5, and we saw the other variation in which white tries to play this desperado move. Turns out that black is still doing more than okay. Alright guys, I will catch you in the next video. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.